All right, today we're going to dig into a really tricky topic in the world of sustainability, the EU's big green label problem. Let's jump right in.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a store staring at two different products, and both of them are shouting about how green or eco-friendly they are, and you're just standing there wondering, okay, but which one is actually better for the planet? If so, you're not alone. It's a total jungle of green claims out there.
This confusion actually has a name. It's called greenwashing. And according to the European Environmental Bureau, we'll call them the EEB, the insane number of unproven green claims makes it pretty much impossible for us, the consumers, to really know what we're buying.
So to try and cut through all that noise, the European Union has been cooking up a solution. The big idea? A single, standard way to measure a product's real environmental impact.
It's called the Product Environmental Footprint, or PEF. And the concept is honestly brilliant in its simplicity. Just create one single agreed-upon method to measure a product's impact across its entire life, from raw materials all the way to disposal. The best way to think about it is like an environmental nutritional label for, well, everything. Now, actually creating these rules for every single product category, that's a massive undertaking. It's this whole multi-stage process with tons of analysis, consultation, and testing, bringing in all sorts of different experts. The whole point is to build a system that's both super robust and totally reliable.
But is the process really working the way it's supposed to? Well, a major environmental watchdog decided to take a closer look, and they've given this whole ambitious project a much-needed reality check.
And that critique comes from the European Environmental Bureau, the EEB we mentioned earlier. And these guys know what they're talking about. They're Europe's biggest network of environmental organizations, and they were actually part of the steering committee during the EU's pilot phase. So yeah, they had a front row seat.
So what did they find? Well, the EEB discovered that the technical groups that were actually shaping the rules were, let's just say, dominated by industry experts. In fact, get this, environmental NGOs were only involved in just two of the 20-plus groups. That definitely raises some serious questions about balanced representation, right?
And the next big problem? A real lack of transparency. The studies that were supposed to support the scores, the ones using real-world data from actual products, were kept completely confidential. All that crucial data was fed into what the EEB started calling a black box, which made it absolutely impossible for anyone on the outside to check the work. This quote from the EEB really just says it all, doesn't it? The pilot phase didn't open up that black box of how these assessments are made, which kind of makes you wonder, without any transparency, how can we really trust the final score? Okay, so beyond the process, the EBB also raised some huge questions about the content. I mean, even if the process was perfect, what important environmental stuff might this single score be leaving out? This image here, which is based on the donut economics idea, shows the problem so clearly. The PEF operates inside this set boundary, right? But so many of our planet's biggest environmental and social problems are way outside of it. A single score just can't capture that whole picture. So what are we talking about specifically? Well, the EEB points out that the PEF method, as it stands, really struggles to measure gigantic issues like biodiversity loss, the toxic impact of chemicals, and how ecosystems function. It also completely misses social impacts. And get this, even something as basic as a product's durability, how long it actually lasts. And this is where it gets really dangerous. That one simple score gives you the impression of a complete, totally comprehensive assessment of a product's impact. But here's the kicker. There's no rule that says companies have to tell you what isn't included in that score, and that can be incredibly misleading. So where does that leave all of us? We've got a system with a really noble goal to fight greenwashing, but it has some pretty serious flaws, both in how it's made and what it measures. So what's the future for these eco-labels? This really gets to the heart of the conflict, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the promise of PEV, a single score to cut through the greenwashing noise. But on the other, you have the EEB's very real concern that this score is incomplete, potentially misleading, and ultimately just not ready to be a standalone label for you and me. So the main takeaway from the EEB's whole analysis is this. The product environmental footprint might be a useful tool, maybe for businesses or policymakers behind the scenes, but it is not the silver bullet for consumers. It's just not ready to be used all by itself as a green label on a product. And that really leaves us with one final, big question to think about. In a world with super complex supply chains and interconnected ecosystems, can one little number on a package ever truly tell the full environmental story of a product? It's probably the biggest challenge we face in our search for a more sustainable future.